Earlier this year, I had the thyroid cancer, right? They took out the thyroid, and we're not to the end of that road just yet. But one of the things that I have learned in this medical journey is the necessity, right? The absolute requirement that that all of us individually, um, take charge of our own medical stuff. I mean, it's not legal, okay? It's not legal, but I think it's one of those life lessons I think is important, and so I'm sharing it. Um, so when you don't have a thyroid, they give you these pills. And you got to take the pills every morning, and on the label it says take before breakfast. They don't say how long before breakfast. They just say take before breakfast. Now, I know this will come as a shock to everybody, but I like to drink coffee. I like coffee. I've been drinking it since I was a dishwasher at age 15. Serious, serious. It was midnight and I was falling asleep and on my feet, and the other dishwashers, we still had to wash it was like midnight, yeah, and we still had to wash the floor and clean up, and they're like, "Oh, you need a cup of coffee there," and I liked it. And so, here we are 50 some odd years later. And, I'm sure I'm keeping Juan Valdez in Burroughs there, whatever. Whoever picks the coffee beans doing just fine by me. Or maybe it's Starbucks and keeping him in Jets or whatever. Anyway, the point is, drink a lot of coffee. And I've had the symptoms of what they call hypothyroidism, which is you're not getting enough of it, the thyroid hormone, whatever. Okay, even though the endocrinologist says, "Oh, you're on the maximum dose there. That's a pretty hefty dose you got there," and I'm like, "Well, here's how it makes me feel, blump, blump, blump." And they're like, well, your body's just adjusting to it. That's what they tell you. Your body's just adjusting to it. And I'm like, really? So, okay, doctor tells you that. You say, well, okay, you're the doctor, you must know what's going on. And so, but, I mean, the consequences are not very good. I'm not very happy with the result, but okay, this is the deal, I guess. I guess this is the deal. Well, then I went to the interwebs, right? I went to the Google up. Well, what about because I was wondering, you know, um, if I took it at night because I just did a Boy Scout overnighter, and I'm thinking, well, if I take it down, how does all that work? And so, and you can point the finger at me for not having done the research before. I didn't, but finally did. And it's like, oh, you're not supposed to drink coffee for like 4 hours after you take this stuff, right? And you're not supposed to eat for 4 hours before, which was the question I had because it was, you know, getting late at night, and it's Boy Scouts and they're eating pizza at midnight and all that. And I'm thinking, well, how is this going to affect? Well, it's like, well, there's the answer. And I've been complaining about this. I'm not much of a whiner, okay, but I'm like, I'm really concerned about muscle weakness and cold fingers and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh yeah, those are the symptoms of not getting enough of this stuff. And I'm like, well, all right, up the dose. And it's like, well, you're kind of where we want you to be in terms of the maximum dose. And did anybody say, hey, how much coffee do you drink? No. Say, hey, how soon after how soon after you pill are you eating breakfast? None of that. I figured, like half an hour would be fine. Why not? It just says take before breakfast. So my point is not the specifics, right? My point is when you read this stuff, it's like this is really pretty obvious. Okay, this is not, and they recognized what the symptoms meant, but the question was, how do we fix this? And as I've shared before, I mean, I had symptoms before they were finally recognized. I had symptoms for like 5, 6 years. You know, I can't even go that far back. But at least 5 years had symptoms. Now it's an unusual form of cancer, and that's an unusual. It's all unusual, and so can't blame it. Nobody's fault because it's so unusual. Okay, fine. That doesn't help me. And then once you start looking at it, it's like, oh, there's all this information out there. My point is, my point is that when it comes to your health, when it comes to What's the good thing? What's the bad thing? Right? Look, what I've always like just relied on the doctor. If they tell you that, must be right. And here's why this is especially irresponsible for me to do this. Okay? Like what I tell you about how estate planning works, what I tell you about how long-term care, all that stuff, right? Mostly I'm swimming upstream against the majority advice that people get. All right. Now I know what I do works. It's 34 years. I know this works, and I know that their advice is terrible advice, really bad. But the point is that what everybody else is telling you is just kind of the mainstream. It's what everybody does. And malpractice is not when your advice is bad or fails. Malpractice is when you do something other than what everybody else is doing in a similar circumstance. Okay? That's what malpractice is. It's when you violate the standard of care. Now, the fact that the standard of care doesn't particularly work well, oh well. Mm. And I know this. I already know that people tend to repeat what they've heard, and they tend not to dive into it, and they tend not to get to the root of the matter. I've seen a whole raft of professionals do that in an area that I happen to be familiar with. And I challenge you, look around. What When you think about the advice that people give, think about something that you know about, you really know about. Could be a hobby, could be your job, could be whatever. And you think, now maybe you think, and please God, this is the case. Maybe you think, hey, we all agree that this is how you do it, and this is how you do it, and now it works. Okay. But think how often you get advice from professionals, from people you think would know that you know for sure is not right in an area in which you are very familiar, in an area in which you're the expert, right? And you can see that the advice that everybody else is getting just not right. Whether it's plumbing, oh, PVC is just fine. What they don't tell you is the stuff gets brittle and cracks after a while. They don't tell you that. Then you think, oh, it's good as copper. Maybe, but it isn't. And yet that's the advice that everybody gets. So you see what I mean? It's not different in other areas, and medical is one of them, right? They say the same things that everybody else says, and it's not like they're bad, and I'm very grateful to my physicians and all the rest of it. I wouldn't be here if they hadn't done what they did. So I'm very grateful for that, okay? At the same time, if you don't take responsibility for it, you're going to get some information, you're going to get some that isn't quite right. Okay, they're repeating what they heard. Everybody's busy. They got a lot to do. Okay, so when you tell them, "Hey, here are my symptoms," and they're like, "Well, your body will adjust and it'll be okay," and get the hell out of here. I got 3 more people who are bleeding out on the floor over there. I got to get to them. It's like, okay, okay, take charge of your own stuff. Understand what you're doing. That's all I'm saying. But when you do, okay, things will go better for you. You will find out stuff that you don't already know.